these are your ingredients.
Be sure to use beef base instead of beef bouillon because it has a lot less salt and it'll taste a lot better. Cut beef into 1.5-inch cubes, salt it, then leave it for about 30 minutes and then pat dry. You do this so that it pulls some of the moisture out and concentrates the beef flavor. The beef will also be a little bit drier, so it's going to brown up better and not simply steam in the pan. Slice your mushrooms up. The mushrooms are very forgiving. If you have a few less or a few more, it really won't matter. Everything will taste great just the way it is. Dice up your Mirepoix. Mirepoix is also very forgiving. If you end up with an extra rib of celery or you have an extra carrot or you're short a little bit of vegetable, don't worry about it. Everything's going to cook down into a really good taste. So if you're a little bit off with your proportions, everything's going to be fine. Go ahead and cook the bacon down. I wouldn't cook it until it's too crisp, but it should be fully cooked. Be sure to save all the grease on the side because we're going to use that to cook some of the vegetables and the beef. At this point, your mise en place is finished. Be sure to keep everything handy because at this point forward, you're going to be cooking and you'll be busy the whole time. So you don't want to have to go back and slice things up because it'll break your rhythm. Go ahead and saute the mushrooms and be sure to cook them until most of the fluid evaporates. The mushrooms will shrink in size and they'll grow in flavor. They'll also often leave a little bit of moisture down the bottom. So what you can do is remove the mushrooms and then cook that moisture down. When your mushrooms are finished, they'll look like this. They will have dropped in size by about half. And sometimes if they're very wet mushrooms, you'll still have liquid down the bottom. But I'll show you what to do for that on the next slide. Go ahead and cook that liquid down until it forms almost a glaze. It'll get darker and darker. You don't have to worry too much about overcooking. If you cook it down and it becomes kind of hard and gelid, just add a little bit of water and mix it around and it will reinvigorate it, and then you can bring it down to whatever thickness you want. Then you want to start cooking the beef. The important thing is that you want to work in small batches and you want to be patient. So you want to take the beef as dry as possible and put it into the bacon fat so that you get a good crisp brown on the outside. Then as each side browns, you want to turn it over and cook it on all 6 sides if you can. In this slide, you can see that I've put too many pieces in the pan, and what happens is you get a lot of steam coming off it, and it prevents it from browning properly. It's not bad, but it won't taste quite as good. This is just about perfect. There aren't too many pieces in the pan, you don't get quite as much steam, and as you can see from the outside, the pieces are browning properly. That's called a function of the Maillard process, and that's where you're going to build a lot of flavor into the beef itself. Another look at the beef. Notice that the outsides are cooked. They're not quite black, they're not burnt, but they're properly browned. And the middle is still going to be about medium to medium rare, and that's fine. Go ahead and just take those out of the pan, put them onto a cookie sheet and save them temporarily while you're doing different groups of this. In the next, you want to take the hot pan and you want to deglaze it. So to do this, you're going to pour about 1/3 cup of red wine and you're going to mix it around a little bit. As you can see, the red wine will foam up instantly, and those brown bits on the bottom are filled with flavor, and we want to try to recover those. To do that, you'll take either a wooden spoon or something sturdy, and you want to scrape those bits off the bottom and go ahead and try to mix them in and dissolve them with the wine. When you first start, the wine will still be quite purple, and it'll smell very strongly of wine, but as it steams off and the liquid evaporates, it'll grow a little bit darker and more brownish. You'll know it's finished when it reaches this thicker consistency, a little bit like soy sauce, and then you can pour that off to the side and save it for later. That'll be filled with a lot of taste. It'll have a lot of umami to it. Here's another look at that. I haven't been able to get as much of the brown bits off the bottom, but if you scrape those, they'll still go into the final product. Once the beef is finished, we're going to start cooking up the mirepoix, the vegetables. So what you'll do is you'll put a little bit of the fat into the bottom and then warm it and then add your vegetables. And you can do this all in one go. The important thing is that you don't want the vegetables to brown. They're not going to cook necessarily. What we're really going to do is sweat them so that they shrink in size, give up some of their liquid, and concentrate their flavor. So you want to watch this really constantly and keep mixing it up from the bottom so that the whole cooks thoroughly, but that you never have anything on the bottom that browns. You also want to be sure to scrape the sides so that there aren't nomadic pieces on the side that will dry out and overcook or cook faster than everything else in the base. Once the vegetables are finished, you'll see that they're glassy and they've sweated out probably a third, maybe a half of their liquid. They'll be smaller, the leeks and the onions will be a little bit limp, and the carrots will still be hard, and that's totally fine. What's happening here is there's some slight caramelization, and then the cell walls are breaking down and releasing more flavor. Now we're going to start layering our casseroles. So on the bottom, you'll just put the veggies straight in. You should fill the bottom and just make sure that all that sort of wet liquid is going to be down the bottom, and it'll eventually cook up and it'll steam everything else that's going to be above it. For the next layer, go ahead and put the mushrooms on top. Then add some of your tomato paste. Then you can put the beef on top. And then you want to go ahead and start filling this with some liquid. You'll have all of the liquids that you cooked down from the mushrooms. You'll have the wine reduction from the meat itself. You'll have the stock, and you'll have a little bit of wine. In a pinch, you can always put a little bit of water in. It certainly won't hurt it, and the flavors here are going to be pretty concentrated, so you kind of can't go wrong. Don't let the liquid be too high, because as it warms, it's going to expand a little bit, and it would otherwise go over the rim. Then go ahead and put your bacon on top. Then if you have Parmesan rinds, you can plop them right on top. Eventually, you're going to take the Parmesan rinds out. They are edible, but they're not super tasty. Then you're going to put a Bouquet garni on top. And this, again, is very, very flexible. If you don't have all of the herbs, it doesn't matter. As long as you're not putting all of one herb in, everything else is going to balance itself out pretty well. Be sure to push everything down into the liquid so that things are not sitting on top and dry out once you start cooking. Add a little bit of liquid if you need to in order to make everything work. And then go ahead and cover. And you're going to put into the oven. And the important thing here is that you want to cook it long enough for the meat to cook all the way through and then to relax. And this is a chemical process that takes time. There's no way to rush it. So you have to cook it long and slow in order for the proteins first to go ahead and cook thoroughly and then to relax and soften. And if you do it properly, then when it comes out, everything will have mixed together, the flavors will have amplified, and the meat itself will be really tender. Be sure just before you serve that you take out the Parmesan rinds and the Bouquet garni and just go ahead and discard those. If you want to chop a little bit of parsley and put it over the top, you can.
And that's how to make the best beef stew of all time.